Everyone. The talk will be in English. We would like to welcome Rawi, who is an architect based in LA. He's operating at the intersection of architecture and engineering. He's also an associate at the Walter and P. Moore Associates. Thanks. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to share some insight to some of the work I've been doing in the past years. And some of this has been research, some of it has been academic teaching, and some of it has been practical in professional offices. So I come from Jordan, from Amman, and I've lived in Toronto, where I studied there. And I also completed my master's in London at the AA. And I've been in Los Angeles for the past about 4 to 5 years, working at 2 offices. I started at Synthesis Design, and now I'm at Walter P. Moore and Associates. So my talk today is called Computational Geometry Across Research, Practice, and Academia. And what it's about is creating digital geometry using new technologies, and how these can change the way we think, the way we build, and the way we look at things. So these are a few projects up on the screen that I think reference the term computational geometry. And they're at different scales. Some of these are small projects, some of these are huge stadiums. There's actually a chair here, and some of it is academic work as well from some of our students. This one, for example, is a small shelter we designed in Palm Springs for Amazon. It's by a small architecture company in Los Angeles called Formfound Design. We did the engineering, and it's made out of concrete, but it's cast using robots. So you have 2 robotic arms, and they place fabric formwork in between, and they cast concrete in this formwork, and then assemble all the pieces together. So that's one example. Another is a project I worked on, which is a small shelter for a Volvo car. This is the Volvo plug-in hybrid electric car, and it's a lightweight fabric. It has solar panels that can charge the car out of the shelter itself, and you can disassemble the shelter and put it in the trunk of the car. And this won one of the best 20 inventions of the year by Time magazine in 2013. Another one I'm currently working on is the George Lucas Museum of Narrative Art in Los Angeles. We're looking at new technologies for facades. We're actually looking at composites, FRP, resins, on how to create this shape. Unfortunately, I can't share information yet about this one other than the main images. So in terms of research, I'll talk about Cellular Complexity, which is the piece we have exhibited in Amman Design Week. And this is a collaboration with Julia Kerner and Marie Boltenstern. We started this in London about 5 years ago. And we were interested in nature and how nature creates cellular structures. So you see here at different scales how cells exist, in Arabic al-khalaya, and how these change in their thickness, in their size, to address different properties in natural objects. And in the same object, for example, a starfish, you see cellular structures at different scales. As you zoom in more and more, you find different cellular structures in nature. And we were interested in that. They exist in many different things in nature, in 2D or 3D form. And we've looked at all of these and studied the variations in between. What we also did is we took a few objects to St. Mary's Hospital in London, and we CT scanned them. So you take a stone or a starfish and put it on the CT scanner, and it runs through it, and what you get is slices, so you can see what's inside the object. From these studies, we we compared it back to how it is mathematically, to a pure geometry, to more, straight lines or rectilinear mathematical forms, and started to create 2D geometries, which created gradients. So where you're able to change the opening size, which is called porosity. And then we took this into 3D form, how from 2D to 3D, and again creating a gradient in porosity. And then in 3D form in multiple shapes. So there are multiple geometries that you can create with these structures. From that point, we looked at actual applications and possible buildings. I think my clicker is stuck. There we go. And then we looked at how you can morph these shapes, how you can twist it, how you can raise it in the middle, how you can shape it in different ways so it's not regular and the same. And also analyzed it structurally. How does it perform when you put weight on it? How does it perform when wind hits that structure? And we looked at, because we had so many different structures, we studied almost all of them to see how they perform. And we again looked at new technology to fabricate things. This is a robot with a simple plasma cutter head. And we have a sheet of metal and it cuts through it to create parts for what we looked at as a prototype for a facade. And then we used robots to actually take video footage of that piece. You can develop a path of how to film these, and that's being used actually in the Hollywood movie industry quite frequently now. From there, we applied to a competition for the American Institute of Architects, and that competition was an exhibition design to show the best projects in California from architecture schools. And we created these two cellular twists that sit in the exhibition, and we won that competition. And the AIA sponsored the fabrication of it. It was exhibited at the A+D Museum in Los Angeles. Here you see both twists. That's the area where it transitions from the flat part to the vertical part. And there's no adhesives, glue, or bolts or mechanical fasteners in these pieces. It's all joined together with the same plastic joint. It's a PVC sheet material, and that's how the piece comes together. And this same piece is the one, of course, we have exhibited here. It's been great to have this part of the exhibition in Amman. So that's the Cellular Complexity project. I'll speak a bit about practice. Some of the work, mostly what we did with Walter P. Moore. And we're an office of about 600 people, 15 office branches, mostly focused on structures, but we do facades, enclosure practice. And that's the one I'm part of. And one of our specialties is actually membrane design. And I gave a similar talk last week in Switzerland, in Bern, for the Advanced Building Skins conference. And in membranes, there's been sort of four main stages. There's the vernacular, and then there was physical prototyping, then digital tools, and computational. The vernacular architect, actually, the Middle East has one of the very first examples by the Bedouin tents we have here in Jordan, which are quite intelligent in the way they create shelter, because it's made out of organic material. When it rains, it swells and creates a watertight surface. It's lightweight and transportable. And then only until about the, I think, probably 60s or 70s, Fry Otto started to study how these shapes were created and created them in a more engineered way. These are some of his projects here in Germany. So one project we're working on in Los Angeles is the NFL stadium. which is probably the largest and most expensive stadium in the United States currently. It has this very large roof structure that is clad with metal and then a transparent material. So this is the view from above, and it's actually a view you would experience as you visit Los Angeles, because the stadium is on the path to LAX. So when you land at the airport, this is the site from about a few months ago. As your plane is landing, you'll see the stadium either on your right or on your left. So it becomes part of the experience of arriving in LA. And they have a lighting system which will create visual effects on the roof, and it's a transparent roof. They're hoping to host activities that can be not only football games, but Oscars and Emmys and Final Six, any kind of activity because of the closed roof. So that's the general structure that we've developed. Everything in red is cables, and these cables are 1,000 feet long in the long direction. So in meters, that's about 300 meters spanning in just cables. One square is 18 by 18 meters, which is probably the size of this entire space. That's one square in the roof. That's the experience from the inside. The material is called Ptfe, and it's very lightweight. It's 1% the weight of glass, and it's a membrane. It's flexible, so it needs to be tensioned. And that's one of those squares. And Ptfe has a specific span. It can only go about 15 to 20 feet. So we've designed trusses in between to break up this panel and have the Ptfe in between, and then it has cables to reinforce it. So that's one project. I'll share one more, which is a slightly different material. It's called Ptfe instead of the E. It's not transparent, it's translucent. It lets some light through, but it's actually a structural material. You can walk on it, it becomes very rigid. And this is a practice facility in Jacksonville, Florida, adjacent to a stadium. And it has a performance venue in the back, about for 5,000 people. That's the interior of where the players would practice before the football game. And the architect wanted this clear, clean indoor space with no structure. And so we worked together with the architect on a process back and forth, cycling through options and designs. And a lot of this happens through sketches. So these are some of the options we created. They might look very similar, but actually each one resolves something different in the design. It's designed for optimal spans, for specific areas, and so on. So the architect's intent was Jacksonville has a main bridge, which is very prominent. It has an estuary. And they wanted to combine these two elements and create a design that created this alternate landform. And so we worked together with them to develop this. And what we do for large projects is something called Windtunnel Testing. So they create a small model of the building, and then they place it in a wind tunnel. They blow air at the building, and that can determine how much wind different parts of the building is going to get, and then you engineer the building to that. So these are images showing the steel sizes on the left, and then on the right how much the fabric moves. The purple part means with wind it moves more than the yellow and green. And these are all complicated geometries. So what we do is we document every point on the project. We take the trusses in steel, and we document every point as an XYZ value in actual space. And it's modeled in 3D to a full level of accuracy. Every small detail, every small plate in the building makes it to that. So you start with a drawing, then a 3D model, and then it gets built at the shop, and then it's put up on the site, as you can see in the sequence. This is the steel put up in about two and a half months. This entire project was designed and built in less than a year and a half, which was one of the fastest projects we've ever done. And then the fabric starts to go up on the roof. That's a view of the steel complete and almost half of the fabric up. And that's the main facade of the building, large doors that open up. And the interior achieves what the architect wanted. All the steel is above the practice facility. Okay, the last piece of my presentation will be about something I do here in Jordan. And many of you actually sitting here have been involved in this part. So it's great to present it. I'll start about just a quick introduction about the AA. And what is the AA? You know, what do we talk about when we talk about the AA? So the AA is a private architecture school based in London. It's the oldest school in the UK for architecture, established in 1847. It is independent. It doesn't belong to a government or any public entity. It's only architecture focused. It's very international. Its students come from all around the world. It's also very forward thinking and radical. So this is an image taken from the 70s, and the person on the left is actually the director of the AA on an elephant across Bedford Square in the middle of London. And to me that explains a lot what the AA is about and what its events are like. You may recognize in this image a student at the time at the AA doing an exhibition, Zaha Hadid, where while she was at the AA developing new ideas for architecture and art, and a lot of these ideas of how things smoothly transition within spaces, I think, made it to her building. So it's an experimental environment at the AA which can lead to new ideas of thinking. And of course she was involved until unfortunately her passing by lectures and by teaching for many years. So the AA in Jordan, we've been running this program for 5 years. Actually, we'll be going into our 5th year. We've done 4 years so far. And we try to check different places in Jordan. So we've done, we're always based here in Amman. And we've done Petra and Wadi Rum in 2014 and 2017. This year we've done the Dead Sea in 2015 and Aqaba in 2016. And we'll be doing Petra and Wadi Rum again next year. So what we've been looking at is what I would call natural extremities. So things we see in Jordan that are quite unique in nature, that you don't find everywhere else in the world. And these include the desert, the salt, and the corals that we find in the Red Sea, the Dead Sea, Wadi Rum. So to give you a few examples of what our participants and students have been doing, this is a pattern they photographed in the Dead Sea at the Arab Potash Company. And they were interested in this pattern, and the task was to design an interior dome for a spa, a bath in the Dead Sea. And they took this design and transformed it from natural objects to actual interior spaces that are quite unique and related to nature. And they also have their performance aspect, so they generated this design over multiple iterations and multiple generations, and they picked the most ideal based on light penetrating through the space. They wanted most light inside, but no direct sunlight to the people inside. Another one is in Petra, looking at the Siq, and the students were interested in how this path formulates and that experience of walking through it. And the project was to design structural columns, but they had a different take on columns, on how you can organize them to create this type of experience, and also how to modulate light through these columns. One more project from Wadi Rum is about erosion in the desert and how wind and water have created such patterns. And this project studied this image, and what I find unique is that there's almost no scale to the image. It can be something really big, it can be also something really small, and that also means you can scale it to architecture. And they developed an alternate landform in Wadi Rum for hikers and for people who want adventure. So they're recreating the landscape in a way where you can use it more functionally. And that was through what is called agent-based modeling. They used a tool called processing to develop these with natural elements. One more project looking at a leather coral in Wadi Rum, in Aqaba, in the Red Sea. And they were interested in this form, and the task was to design a station for looking at corals, because along the shore, the corals are depleting because of the amount of people going on the shore and actually destroying the reefs. So we're looking at something remotely in the sea where you can visit and go into the corals, and they developed this type of architecture that floats and lets corals grow on it and let people visit it and explore the coral reefs. And again, they were studying different ways of creating form organically. So the program itself is 10 days. We run design units where you're designing a project throughout. The projects you've seen in the past slides are part of the design units. We give seminars on new tools of how to design, seminars on software, and on lectures on the topic. We invite international guests to come and speak about their work. We travel to these locations in Wadi Rum, Petra, and others. And beyond the workshop, after the 10 days, we run publications and exhibitions to show the work. So that the design units, we usually run multiple design units, 3 of them, and each looks at a specific scale. So one looks at an urban scale, one at more of a space scale, and one as a material. We have a great team of faculty who teach and design abroad. We also are supported by many local institutions such as the German Jordanian University, among others in the region and internationally. So 4 years of the visiting school have brought 152 individuals from 36 countries. So the crowd is very international. Almost half of it every year is from outside of Jordan. The other half is locals. So it's a great exchange experience. This is us in the Dead Sea. When I show this to people outside of Jordan, they think we're standing on snow, but it's actually about 40 degrees outside, and this is all salt that we are standing on. And we see formations like this in those unique locations. Similarly, in Aqaba, we've taken everyone snorkeling to see the coral reefs, and Petra throughout the past 2 years, Wadi Rum. And we like to invite guests with us to these locations. These are our students this year in Wadi Rum. And we explore it in every way possible. So this is actually a British designer, Ross Lovegrove, who joined us in 2014. He was in love with the desert. You might know some of his works. He's done anything from a water bottle to lights, speakers, chairs, cars. Great designer. And he came with us to Wadi Rum and gave a lecture from the middle of the desert for about 3 hours in the desert camp, which was quite an enjoyable experience. Another lecture here in Amman at the German Jordanian University from Julia Kerner, who does 3D printed fashion, and many others from UNESCO, Arab, Walter P. Moore, ICD in Stuttgart. This is Ben Aranda, who is from New York. Him and his partner are very interested in crystals, and they've been designing objects that look like crystals for maybe 10 or 15 years, and he only realized when he came to Jordan that some of these existed in nature in the Dead Sea while he was out here. So this year and the past year, this year and next year, we've been interested in Mars. Given The Martian has been filmed here in Jordan and Wadi Rum, it's become our topic of interest for the next few years, and we looked at it this year. We invited a guest to speak virtually to us from NASA. So the two people you see here, our guest on the left is Rob Mueller, and on his right, some of you may recognize Buzz Aldrin from NASA. And he joined us on a talk where he spoke to us about all the research that they have done about mission to Mars by NASA, and gave us a great background on how to design for Mars. These are actually some images from the movie The Martian before. This is Wadi Rum as it is, and this is after they did some editing. And if you notice, actually the differences are really, really small. It is mostly within the sky, making it red instead of blue. That was one of the main elements they did, but beyond that, there was not much editing. So these are some landscapes from Wadi Rum that we're interested in, and there's an amazing range of landscapes in Mars that we want to study over the next year or two. And as we've been interested in nature on Earth, I think a lot of the nature on Mars holds great potential for designers, and that's something we'll be looking at. So it's quite an exciting experience. It's a great design culture that we run within the visiting school. A lot of hard work and a lot of great projects at the end. It's generally a very positive experience that everybody enjoys, and we'll continue this program next year, and we hope to see more people interested. And that's actually the end of my talk. Thank you. Yeah, we can do a few questions, I think, if anybody has. Sure.
I just have one simple question. I'm an architecture graduate. Got my bachelor's degree from AUS, the American University of Sharjah. And I feel like this is a conversation that's consistently happening, and I feel like this is still very relevant in this region, where architecture is taught as a design discipline versus an engineering discipline. And I'm interested to hear your take on this, as you've kind of worked in a medium between the two. And of course, this leads us to the conversation of form versus function. And the traditional sense of architecture is that it has to be built, and it's a watertight space, and there's like a clear understanding of what architecture is. But with technology, it's provided a lot of potential for what architecture could become. And so I would just kind of like to hear your thoughts on that, idea.
No, that's a great question, and not an easy one to answer. I think in terms of architectural education, I think it's almost neither design, neither engineering. I think I see it more in technology, and I see it more in even less technical, because I think technicality is an aspect that is best learned in practice instead of in academia. So I see the ideal place for architectural education is to be sort of a mind opener, or a place to think of innovative ways, to have the time and luxury to do that in schools where you can't really do it in practice most of the time, and that ends up always feeding practice with with new ideas and ways to do things. While practice, you know, maintains the technical aspect and the real aspect to things for people to learn there.
Being a student to being a practicing architect, I feel like that's kind of caused a lot of disappointment, so to speak, in architectural students, because they're taught to think of architecture as this, you know, other universe.
Yeah.
You know, their design creativity is fed very well.
Yeah.
But in the practical world, you know, that structure that you design has to be built eventually, so it causes a lot of
It clashes at
constraints.
some point.
So I feel like maybe that's just something that we're still struggling with till now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good question. Thank you. Any other questions we can take?
Comments, questions? No? Are you sure? Okay, so we'd like to thank you. That was such an enriching talk.
Thank
And
you.
great work, Qais.
Thank you.